Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. Hope you're having a beautiful day and welcome back to the Polyhedra Show. So today, guys, another community show. Of course, I'm joined by one of my favorite people, Morgan. How are you doing today, Morgan?
Hi, everyone. Great to be back.
It's great to have you back again, Morgan. I always love these community shows. I know that it is the evening edition. For me, it's clearly morning, daytime, but what a such a fun way to start the day. Some epic, awesome community questions that we've had come through and been able to shape the show around today. I think some people were inspired by our last Q&A, Morgan, because we had some questions about robotics, which I was so excited about. So I thought I'd slide that one in there as well. And yeah, guys, everything from AI trained on synthetic data, obviously our upcoming huge events, upcoming at ETH Denver and Consensus Hong Kong. And of course, our Proof of Love campaign for Valentine's Day. This is going to be a very action-packed show. Very exciting.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for submitting your questions. As you know, we're here to chat about everything from AI to decentralization to emerging blockchain tech and what it means for the future of Web3. So excited to jump in with everyone today.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to get started with a really fun one, our Proof of Love campaign. Obviously, with Valentine's Day just around the corner, we're running the Proof of Love campaign. This is a creative contest where you, our community, you can showcase all of your AI and blockchain-inspired art. So whether that's 2D, 3D, GIFs. Morgan, I've got to ask you a question. Have we ever, as a global community, landed on whether it's GIF or GIF? Maybe I missed the memo.
Okay, so I saw on Reddit, like probably almost a decade ago at this point, that the guy who helped to create them said it's pronounced GIFs, like the peanut butter. However, I understand why people would say GIFs because the G stands for graphics, right? So graphics interchange format. So honestly, I can see it going both ways, but I say GIF myself. So
so interchangeable, maybe GIF, like as a gift, because obviously it's Valentine's Day, so maybe we'll go with GIF this time.
Very appropriate.
But yeah, guys, want to see your talent. I was actually just scrolling through some of the submissions and some really creative submissions so far. Some hand-drawn ones, which is really cool as well. Kind of showcasing the AI generated versus natural talent. So very, very cool to see.
Yeah. We're so impressed by everyone's talent so far. As you know, there's a 2,000 USDT prize pool. So winners are going to be chosen based on a combination of creativity, theme alignment, engagement, their approach, etc. And for anyone who hasn't submitted yet, the deadline is Valentine's Day, February 14th. So get those submissions in.
Very exciting. I believe we're judging this on a combination of creativity and also engagement. So guys, if you're liking some of these posts as I am, get amongst it. I've actually just scrolled past one here, Morgan. I thought I'd read to you because this is pretty awesome. This is from Pranata. So it says, "Happy Valentine's Day. My love is like zero knowledge proofs, pure, undeniable, and forever secure, revealing only what truly matters."
Oh my God, that's beautiful. That's actually really good. Well done.
Yeah, might have to give that one to my girlfriend for Valentine's Day. But yeah, very, very cool, guys. So keep them coming, and yeah, hashtag Polyhedra Proof of Love on Twitter X. You can post them up there, and yeah, jump in the chance to win some prizes. Very, very cool. I'm going to ask you, Morgan, with all of this AI, versus organic content, what's your opinion on? So if AI could write you the perfect love letter, do you think is that romantic or is that terrifying?
Well, you mean like, is it pretending to be a real person or is it just being itself and it's just writing a love letter to me?
That's a good question. Okay, let's put it. Let's say both. Let's say a human presents it to you, or like an AI agent.
Okay, I think if it was like an AI agent pretending to be a person, that would be a little freaky because it is so good now that you sometimes can't tell the difference. But also think like, some folks struggle with that kind of creativity. Like not everyone is creative in the same way. And some people are absolutely brilliant, but they maybe just aren't great with words or, it doesn't come naturally to them. So in that case, I could see it being a helpful tool for those kinds of people who maybe aren't as good as expressing those feelings in written form. So definitely a double-sided coin.
Totally, totally. I'd love to hear from the community on this too. Guys, have you ever used AI to write a love letter or, help you plan a date? I personally know a lot of people that have done this. And, there's obviously a lot of applications. This whole campaign really did get me thinking as well. Like in terms of ZK, do you think that beyond this campaign, do you think it's going to become more of a real life concept? Like, obviously we have marriage certificates. Do you think that ZK or even like on-chain verification could maybe one day replace these sorts of things?
Personally, I'm not sure if replace completely is realistic. There's always going to be some folks who probably do it in a more traditional way, but we're already talking about the applications of ZK to other forms of records, right, and certification. So I could definitely see it being applied to something like marriage licenses or something interpersonal as well, beyond just, I think, a lot of the normal context we talk about it in of these governance documents, etc.
Totally. It ties into a question I've actually selected here from the community for us as well, which is what inspired Polyhedra to incorporate the theme of love and Valentine's Day into its ecosystem. The first things that really jumped out at me was obviously, those themes of celebrating connection, community, many love comes in many forms, but also trust, engagement. I think these are all kind of echoing themes with love and with our ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the point you talked about too about the verifiable commitments is valid. And kind of taking this off chain too and having proof of love be a real concept beyond the campaign in the real world, So there's definitely a lot of different ways that we wanted this to intersect with and engage with the community.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. And shout out to our design and creative team for putting this together and our marketing team. It's such a cool campaign. And so many people have gotten around it. Such a really cool way for people to get involved and to be testing these, I guess these technologies that maybe they don't have so much interaction with yet. But very, very cool. So yeah, shout out to the team for that. So I'd like to move on to the next section, moving from our community love to a bit of global innovation. We have a lot going on, which we touched on before coming up in terms of AI and blockchain communities coming together and gathering. So first up, we've got Consensus Hong Kong, which is, very, very soon in the next week. And that's followed by ETH Denver. We had a question from the community about how we plan to use events like ETH Denver and Consensus Hong Kong to drive mainstream adoption.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great question. I'll start off by saying we do also have events at both. So we're excited to see some community members and other leadership in the community come out to those events as well. But in general, events like ETH Denver and Consensus, as well as other conferences, are where a lot of industry leaders, developers, and investors can all come together in one place to define the future of blockchain and AI. So for us, these events serve as platforms to showcase our developments like ZKML, like ZK Bridge, and also engage with other top tier projects and developers in order to create these partnerships that are going to be helpful for us moving forward to drive that adoption.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. I'm getting along to Consensus Hong Kong. Obviously, very, very exciting always to get along to these conferences. Hong Kong is, Now, as opposed to ETH Denver, which is obviously Ethereum, very, very dev focused, and there's, the biggest ETH conference in the world. And a lot happens there, the workshops, networking sessions, side events is always, I think ETH Denver must have the most side events of any event I've ever seen. Like I was scrolling
It's
through
crazy.
the list, I was like, my goodness, there is hundreds. So I'm sure that's going to be really, really exciting time for the team. Obviously, we've got some side events and stuff happening there as well, which we will be announcing. And Consensus Hong Kong next week, we actually have a side event that we're hosting, the Experience AI Summit. This is in partnership with Google Cloud and the Chinese Young Entrepreneurs Association. We're going to be focusing on AI security. We're going to be focusing on verifiable AI and, of course, the role of ZKML in building trust for AI-driven applications. Very exciting. I'm actually going to be moderating a panel at that as well. So for any of our community, if you want to get along, if you want to, if you're in Hong Kong or you're at the event and you'd like to join, please hit us up. We'd love to have you and would love to meet you in person. That'd be very, very cool.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, it's also not just about the events themselves. The partnerships and collaborations are really important. The developer engagement is really important to us. So we don't want this type of connection with our users and our investors and our community more broadly to end at these events and at these conferences. These are about creating real and lasting connections that can shape the future of decentralized AI, not only for us, but also for the larger ecosystem as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Always such a fun time to come together. You obviously learn a lot at these conferences and meet some amazing people. And I can definitely see a lot of growth coming from all of these events, which as always happens. So it's always very, very exciting. So beyond the direct community campaigns and of course the big events coming up, I'd like to jump into some of the topics that we're going to dive into today, Morgan. We've had some, again, very exciting questions. Mm-hmm. So I think the first one, there's been some big news this week in terms of synthetic data, training AI and its role in the future of machine learning. So I'd like to dive into this a little bit with you because it's super interesting, right? The DeepSeek announcement, again, another one this week, with their Janus Pro 7B, which seems to be leading the charge in synthetic data. It's used a 7 billion parameter AI model, which was trained predominantly on synthetic data, which is pretty crazy. And it's really moving away from the reliance on these human labeled data sets that we've had to train these LLMs in the first instance, and kind of a major step towards self-sufficiency for these AIs. I don't know if this is super impressive or more like kind of scary,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it can be a combination of both too, right? And I think that's like what a lot of the conversations that we're having in the community right now are around that, right? Of how to be stewarding these technologies responsibly in a way that we can recognize and appreciate the power that comes with it, but also knowing where to put kind of different parameters in place, no pun intended, in order to make sure that they're serving us in the ways intended.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely the positives and negatives as you've touched on. I guess removing human biases from the data sets. And there's obviously privacy concerns around that as well, in scraping data sets, and seemingly like infinite scalability. If these models can be training on data that it's producing themselves as synthetic data, it's like, where does that end? Because I did hear that it was like these data sets have almost scrubbed the entire, like the models, the original models had almost scrubbed the entire internet, right? Like, it was almost like there's
as much as possible.
Yeah. So it's like there's no more data to be found. Like now we need to generate data. Obviously, it reduces the cost as well of training these models, as we've seen with these open source models. which is quite significant to think about. Obviously, looking at how much capital it took and compute to build these initial, world-leading models at the moment, and then to kind of look at what's happening now in the open source world and kind of extrapolate where that's going to go. It's really open-ended. It's hard to think if it can stop or if it's going to hit some kind of ceiling. I'm not certain.
Yeah, it's a super salient point. I mean, I think the point you made about the bottleneck with real world data is a valid one, right? Where there's only so much available and it's from different types of resources or calculations that have been done. And so the benefit of synthetic data is that it can be created for specific purposes. It will give more access, like an overall broader data set. But there's also issues inherent to that, right? Because if all the data that is the models are being trained on becomes essentially invented or fake in some way, right? What happens if AI starts trading only on AI generated data, right? That's not actually grounded in reality. Even if it very closely mimics or masks what we see in the real world, could this lead to AI that degrades model quality over time or degradation of data more generally? I don't know that right now. I don't think many of us do know that for sure. There's the possibility of recursive feedback loops coming from synthetic data, which is definitely something to be aware of, which is essentially where like mistakes get amplified, right? And if there's no real world points of reference in the data, these misinterpretations that the models make once or twice can really get compounded over time without like a sense of truth in order to kind of hearken back to that. So it really runs the risk of diverging from human logic in a way that we haven't really had to deal with yet. So I'm sure there are a lot of folks working on this and knowing that this is an issue that could come up. But it's important to make sure that these models are not completely detached from reality.
Right. And that they don't just start hallucinating exponentially. Even inherent issues in, there is biases, obviously, across these models that have been trained on human data, especially in the internet. We all know there's biases on the internet and there's bots or whatever. But could there be inherent biases in the synthetic data where if it starts, moving 1 degree, south, then, is it going to keep pushing that way? So I guess that does tie into the need for zero knowledge and for verifiable, outcomes and guardrails for these models, or for synthetic data, proof of origin of the synthetic, where the synthetic data come from, who's,
Totally.
Again, validating or putting the weights there, I think is very, very important. And as these models grow, that's probably going to become more and more relevant, right? Because if it gets to the point where it's like, hey, just anyone can train an LLM in your office or your bedroom and have it run and be training on these synthetic data models, how are you ensuring that data isn't skewing, the outcome for you? So very, very important that, I guess that data remains transparent and verifiable and traceable.
Totally. Huge use case for ZKML.
Absolutely. It's a very fascinating shift happening at the moment. I mean, obviously, reduced costs. I think that the massive one is probably reducing, scraping personal data as well. I think that's another one where, ZKML can step in to, I guess, put those guardrails for people's personal data and ensure that that's, there's nothing wrong happening there, I guess. It's very, very cool. So I guess, what happens when AI no longer needs humans? Does it?
I mean, I think that's what we've been, the kind of singularity type question. We already see AI in some ways, in some cases, generating its own version of reality, whether that's like in images, right? Interpreting things, the way we see models interpreting commands is different from how you intend them sometimes. So that's like the very kind of early steps of this larger question. But, you know, if AI starts training on AI generated misinformation, for example, you know, there's really no limit to kind of how slippery of a slope that is. We might have a model of reality that doesn't even include real human input anymore. So, I mean, none of this is completely isolated to AI. So, for example, that particular example of AI echo chambers, we already have echo chambers in online media in silos as it is. We experience that all the time when we interact with opinions of those who only share our views, for example. That's one example of echo chambers in modern day life. So it's not unique to AI that this might become a problem. But the concern, I think, is more so that with AI models, these types of issues can be amplified to a much greater degree because of the scale that AI has. So we want to be careful, I think, about fake news becoming considered truth to a model, right? And it giving recommendations that are misleading because of it. Or, you know, AI not being able to distinguish anymore between synthetic knowledge, human validated knowledge, et cetera.
Absolutely. Agreed 100%. And again, highlights the need for zero knowledge in this space. And it does tie into a community question beautifully, actually, that I have here by, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Iuduyir, which is DeFi is huge, but I'm fascinated by the potential for ZK proofs beyond finance. Are there any underrated real world applications for ZK Bridge, like supply chain tracking, identity verification, or even gaming ecosystems? What's the most exciting non-DeFi use case you're exploring?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, supply chain tracking is actually something that's close to my heart personally. There's definitely a use for ZK in that. I think one of the biggest use cases, though, that we're looking at is AI verification. So AI models can use ZK proofs to verify their training history, to prevent data manipulation or AI generated misinformation, like what we were just talking about. So essentially, that would be kind of the power of being able to confirm an AI's data set before trusting its outputs, which could really be a game changer for regulation and safety.
Definitely. I agree with the logistics point as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, in terms of the environment, it's obviously such a huge piece of the puzzle for our global economy. And I guess like you can see a lot of streamlining that can happen in that industry. But there's also a lot of regulatory issues. There's issues around IP for companies necessarily not wanting to share certain aspects of their logistics and supply chain. So, I mean, that's a huge case study that I think we're going to see in the next few years, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah,
I guess another big one for me is the digital identity space. You know, ZK proofs being able to allow people to prove aspects of their identity without revealing private details. You know, and in ZKML as well, obviously, you know, huge implications. Everything from government, medical records, even Valentine's Day, like dating, you know, online dating, you know, just being able to verify identity and that, you know, that you're even a person and that you are who you say you are without giving away too much of your personal data, I think is a very, very cool one.
Yeah. And I'll say to that point, we've had conversations with other projects and companies related to both of these. So for example, on the logistics and supply chain planning front, you know, we've heard from certain very large car manufacturers that within their different areas of remit, there are some departments that legally cannot interface and give certain details to other departments, right? They have to operate as independent silos financially and under the law, whether that's because they have a separate P&L or separate jurisdiction or regulations within these different areas, countries, geographies, as well as functions within the company. And so that, from what we were talking about before in logistics, is a prime use case for ZK, right? If one example, let's say receiving or planning, needs to know that a certain part is in place A or place B, they could prove that using ZK without having to actually reveal, which part it is, specifically its exact, place in the warehouse, etc. So there's definitely demand for that nowadays. And regarding identity too, yes, everything you said, I think, and we also see that in, gaming environments as well. One of the biggest conversations we've had about identity on chain, at least in this type of instance, is utilizing ZK identity in order to facilitate transactions on chain. So when someone is playing a game, in one ecosystem, they want to be able to verify that it's them if they need to transfer assets or something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, such a broad category of applications. It's very, very cool, and obviously becoming more and more relevant every day. The need for these applications. So very, very cool. I always love hearing your opinions and your insights as well, Morgan. It's very, very cool. So I think that's a great little segue as well. We might move beyond all of those applications into our next topic, which is definitely one that I know is close to both of our hearts, which is the fight for open source AI and whether decentralization can really compete against a lot of these centralized companies. So right now, AI development is obviously being led by some of the big players. They have the resources, the talent and infrastructure to push AI forward, but their models are primarily closed source. Meanwhile, we have the Metas, the DeepSeeks, they're backing open source AI for greater transparency and accessibility. So the question is, what's the right approach for the future of AI? Is it one or the other, or is there, a dual approach, do you think, that we can have here?
Definitely, that's tough. I think we're seeing different approaches from some of the biggest companies. OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic have really powerful AI models, but they also limit access. And then on the other hand, we have Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, which are investing billions into private AI development. So there are open source players like Meta and Mistral, which really believe more in making AI accessible for global innovation. I think that type of ethos reflects more so the ethos that Web3 and blockchain projects tend to have for the most part, right? DeepSeek in particular is really working to democratize AI development and access, but competing with these larger companies is sometimes a challenge, when you maybe don't have the same resources. Although now we're starting to see that DeepSeek might actually have those more extensive resources, but another topic for another day. All this is to say, this has sparked a bit of a debate, I think, between the centralized corporate AI developers and the decentralized community-driven AI developers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I guess on either side of the fence, the question is, or I guess the answer is, that there needs to be guardrails, right? Open source, anyone can be contributing, but it also means there's less control over how that's used. So definitely the key, I think, is striking a balance between innovation and security, which is very much what we're working on here at Polyhedra. The closed AI models, sure, they can ensure some kind of safety, but there's a limit, and it's a black box system. Where the open source AI, they're definitely pushing and encouraging the faster progress, but there is, issues with how it could be misused, or, concerns about misinformation, etc. So yeah, again, just without the governance, I think, it's hard to ensure that AI models remain ethical and safe, which again is what we're really, really working on.
Yeah, and it's a good point. I think AI, we definitely don't want to stifle innovation, but at the same time, I think innovation will always be there. I think we're seeing that more and more companies are aligning on the importance of governance and ethics, and we'll continue to see different leaders kind of maybe tussle a little bit over how exactly that manifests and what specifically those guardrails turn out to be. But the concerns regarding misinformation, hacking, bias, etc. I think those are all incredibly valid. I think, those problems, again, though, have existed before AI too. So it'll be about learning how to preempt them and work alongside them and see them and understand them better in the same way that we've already adapted most of the time nowadays to being able to fight these things external to AI as well. It's just going to be a little bit harder knowing that AI is very adept at creating these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize, Morgan. I think my internet is a little bit, we've had a bit of a cyclone season here at the moment. So I think my internet is cutting out a little bit, but I'm just trying to fix that up. But no, 100%. Obviously the open source versus, closed debate, like we touched on before, like whether these open source models can keep pace with these, multi-billion-dollar companies, and we are seeing, the synthetic data point, the scale at which these open source models are able to grow and innovate. Like, the synthetic data idea is something that is it's not a brand new idea, but it is something that's come to the forefront very recently, and it does make you wonder, like, what kind of innovation is going to happen that could push these models even further. And obviously human ingenuity is an amazing and beautiful thing. So I have no doubt that there's going to be some more innovation there. But to your point about, that we've kind of always had these same kind of, these issues in community and society. Do you think that AI could become like a decentralized public utility? So where the models are actually trained and governed by the community, as opposed to these centralized structures, whether that's by like a DAO, like could it replace forms of governance, or could it contribute to our current governance? I think it's a really cool question.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a lot of that too comes down to capabilities and competency. Like, part of the reason that we see these tools in the hands of large companies that not only have financial resources to develop them, but also have the expertise to develop them, right? Part of the reason for that is when you think about the majority of people in society, even though it might seem to us blockchain and AI industry folks that everyone's an engineer, the reality is most people are not, right? In everyday life, when you think of the total global population, the majority are not actually actively building these products. And that's why we use technology in all these different ways, whether it's AI or not, right? That's why I buy an Apple computer, because I can't make an Apple computer by myself at my house. And I think the same thing is true with AI in all these different contexts, governance included, where yes, it might be a tool. Yes, it might be more widely used by different communities in different areas for these novel purposes, but the likelihood of it becoming completely open source across the board, where every person is actively contributing to a different data set or a database or a model being developed, is probably smaller, since it's going to be in the hands of specialists. And so there's definitely a balance there between the trust and the expertise, and also ensuring that the models and the agents that we're using don't lose their focus on their original goals and benefiting back to broader society.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of not being an engineer or not being able to create an Apple computer in your house, I think this is a great segue to our next topic, which is robotics. Maybe we could have a personal Optimus bot that's making our computers for us. Who knows what's going to happen? But this is a really exciting question, and thank you guys for submitting a few of these. You definitely made me very excited for this chat, because it's something that is just really, really fun, and it's really cool. I guess what happens when AI stops being just software and moves into the physical realm. So yeah, robotics and AI powered automation, very, very cool, and the race is heating up. There's obviously the Optimus, Tesla, Figure AIs, warehouse robots, sanctuary AIs, general purpose humanoids, all very much pushing the limits of what AI-driven machines can do. From factories to retail to in our homes. Robots, they're definitely becoming more than just industrial tools, which is very, very cool, and obviously a lot happening. So what do you think, Morgan? What's your first move? When are you getting your first humanoid robot?
It's so funny you mentioned this because I was actually at a party here in San Francisco last week that was really hyped about because they were going to have a humanoid robot DJing.
I think I saw this.
Yeah, it was definitely on a lot of news outlets.
Yeah.
And it was, there's aspects of it that I think are no doubt impressive. I think that the implications down the line for these humanoid robots are probably quite far reaching. I will say from my experience, I don't know if they're there yet. It kind of seemed like, have you ever been to Disneyland and you see the animatronic creatures that are kind of just moving like this? It felt like that. So I will say I'm not personally yet, fully bought on. But I know that these are just, leaps and bounds, right? Like we see development, and it's incredibly impressive to build anything like that. Even from a baseline that can move and interact in such a way with its surroundings. So I think we'll continue to see it get more impressive and more applicable to real life as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I was at a show recently, actually, in Macau, and it's at the MGM, I think it was, but they had these, like, at one section, it was like a history of China kind of thing. They had these, it was like the cultural history mixed with like this new age development. They had all these humanoid robots come out, and I was like, here we go, like this is going to be cool. But yeah, again, very static, like this kind of movements. Yeah. There was no like, and they had these fluid dances around them. It was quite a contrast, So it was like, okay, it was really visceral in the way. It was like, okay, we're not really there yet. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was part of the show as well, but they kind of glitched out a little bit, and I don't know if that was like kind of part of the messaging.
It's funny though, because I think it's so easy for us to say that here, not being robotics engineers, for us to say like, oh, it wasn't actually touching the DJ decks and etc. Which it sounds like we're talking down on it. In reality, I'm sure it's incredibly complex to build. I have so much respect for it, but yeah, I do empathize with that. Where I was like, I feel like my friends who are serving coffees, I think their job is still safe for a little while because I'm not sure I would trust that robot yet, but.
Absolutely. I think that ties into like public perception as well. Like, I was in Bangkok recently and they did have like a coffee shop with the robotic arm that was making you the coffee. But, I love interacting with baristas. I mean, when I was at college, I was a barista for a long time, and it's that personal interaction that makes, that can make people's mornings and days so much better. It definitely, and it's that human connection, even just talking to people in the coffee shop, getting to know your barista. It's the same, I think, with all retail. Like there's definitely going to be, like robotics that step in to do certain things. Like I can think like back of house kind of roles in terms of like warehousing and stuff, which has already been happening for a long time. But in terms of personal interaction, I mean, if you've got a coffee shop that has an Optimus robot that's making you a coffee, like sure, it's cool, you might go along a few times, or personally might go along a few times, but then if the one next door has a human, that wants to talk to me and and can interact with them on a human level, I think that's always going to be something that's super special, and I don't think is going away anytime soon.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's probably both sides to the coin because, and this is anecdotal, right? I don't have actual data to back this up off the top of my head, but I would say I think I know plenty of people on either side of the spectrum, right? There are some folks who are like, I'm in a bad mood in the morning, I haven't had my coffee, I don't want to talk to anyone, I just want to get in, get out. Speed is the biggest thing. But then I think probably the majority of people would be on the opposite side of the spectrum, where it's, you maybe don't always appreciate or think to appreciate when you, for example, meet a barista or have a human waiter in real life. But once that's removed and it's only robots everywhere, I think that some of the issues we see in society now, like the loneliness epidemic, which is something that's talked about, especially in the male like podcast sphere and here in America all the time, that type of problem compounds if we're only interacting with robots robots from wake up to wake down, or wake up to going to sleep. Thank you.
Wake down, I love
that. been a long day for me. But you know, so I think that's there's probably some middle ground, but like there's also aspects of public perception and cultural acceptance. So in other areas, for example, in Asia and Japan, robots are more integrated into daily life. You see them more often. In the West, there's still a lot of skepticism. Here in San Francisco, there are tons of billboards that say things like, we're XYZ AI company, don't worry, we're not here for your job. Like they literally say that on the billboard. So I think that there's a perception, at least here in the West, that people are uneasy about humanoid robots and AI more broadly. So, you know, making sure that, and we even heard the vice president talk about this the other day here in the US about replacing versus assisting workers, and making sure the AI strategy in the US is a supplement to our global labor efforts and not completely replacing it. Although some of that is outside of the control of the government, right? But I think overall, it's really just this reflection of the physical versus the digital AI, and that change as we move from using a chat bot to actually interacting with AI and bots in the real world as they become more present, and how people kind of shift to adapt to this physical imposition in their space, and the trust that comes along with it. You know, it remains to be seen whether people will trust these real life robots more or less than their human counterparts. And I think that that's an interesting question.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, you know, the perception that obviously some people have, you know, there's that kind of fear aspect, but then, you know, it is very much a tool. Like even the advancements in, you know, AI coding, I don't think it's coming for devs. You know, I think that it's just going to empower devs to be, I don't think that it's going to be able to necessarily like replace creativity. You know, it's going to be an extremely powerful tool, but there's still going to be a need for creative, you know, creative avenues and creative ways to do things. So I very much think that, you know, the next kind of wave in terms of a lot of this stuff is going to be like AI whisperers, you know, like the way that you would use a tool is the same way. If you know how to interact with AIs to enhance your career, your function in any kind of space, then it can be a great tool to use. But it does, you know, obviously we talk a lot about, you know, zero knowledge and putting the guardrails for AI. And I think a lot of the times we are talking about, you know, digital, like non-physical examples. But what happens when we bring that into the physical realm? Like obviously we've seen it with self-driving cars. But what about like humanoid robots? Like if there is a mistake that happens, like who's held responsible? Is it the developer? Is it the manufacturer? Is it the AI themselves? Do we give them some kind of, is the owner of that particular model? You know, I think there's a lot of questions still that need to be answered in that space, that it's going to be very interesting to see all of that roll out.
Definitely. I mean, I think we've also heard some of these ethical questions around robots too, right? So not only if a robot makes a mistake and who's responsible, but also, you know, the treatment of the robot. We see that studies show that people who people who see human-like features in the robots actually treat them differently and more like a human, even though they know logically that they're just machines. And these are kind of interesting revelations, I think, about human psychology, right? We also see this in things like the uncanny valley effect, where when something looks very close to humanoid, but it's not quite right, we get this kind of sense of dis-ease or unsettlement. So there's a lot of interesting questions coming up about how we will interact with these physical manifestations of AI as well.
Totally. I've even seen it with myself, just with LLMs. Like, like I don't know if anyone else does this, but I find myself like saying a lot of pleases and thank yous. You know, I don't know if it's just like, because I don't. It's like it feels like sometimes you're talking to a human, but also it's just like maybe you'll give me a better outcome if I'm nice, you know, or if I'm rude, maybe you're gonna. Maybe it'll be like, hey, I'm not going to give you the right outcome. And then, you know, sometimes you're like, oh, you're getting frustrated with it. Like, why are you not helping me in the way? And I'm like, I'm sorry, but like, can you please just
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting that that uncanny valley effect.
Mhm.
But Morgan, we are getting on pretty. We've gone through a lot and cycled through a lot, so we might just jump to a few Q&A questions here, guys.
Let's
I have
do
been
it.
trying to get onto the Discord as well, but we had so many questions come through, so we thought we would pick a few of these ones. Thank you so much again for submitting. So let me just jump through a few here, Morgan. I'll choose a couple of good ones for us. Okay, how about this? We'll get back to the proof of love campaign a little bit. So, can zero knowledge proofs be used in real life romantic interactions, such as proving commitment without revealing private details?
That's actually funny. Yes. Imagine being able to prove that you're in a relationship without sharing personal texts or photos. So someone's kind of ribbing you and, you need to prove that. You can cryptographically prove that your commitment exists. Maybe in the future, ZKPs could be used for blockchain-based prenups, some of the things we talked about earlier, loyalty tracking in relationships. Right. There's definitely applications there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess also like, the dating app ZK proof thing as well, being able to verify your identity without revealing any of your personal data or prove you're not a bot. Obviously, we've seen a lot of this
that would
proof
be
of
super
humanity.
Valuable. Yeah,
absolutely. There's obviously a lot of that going on in the online dating world, so I think offsetting that is a great use case for zero knowledge proofs in romantic interactions. Very thanks for the questions, guys. Very, very cool. I think a few of these we have touched on, obviously. Community initiatives, a few of you asking about that. I think we've covered that a little bit. Here's a cool one. I think we spoke about this last week. I know we're not both, neither of us are essentially, quantum computing scientists or cryptographers, but we've had a question of quantum computing is advancing fast. How is Polyhedra future-proofing its ZK-proof systems? I mean, it's definitely a big one. Like quantum computers could break a lot of talk about how they could break traditional cryptographic systems. So future-proofing our ZK proofs is definitely a top priority for us here at Polyhedra. We're obviously already exploring post-quantum cryptography, which is resistant to quantum attacks. I think we talked about this last time, Morgan, but it would be great to have some of our team come on the show to discuss this a bit further.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we also are working on partnerships with other researchers in the post-quantum space for post-quantum ZKML specifically. So the ZKML that we talk quite a lot about, not only on the show here, but also in some of our materials and some of the things that we're developing and working on in-house. There's a post-quantum aspect of that could be really valuable. So we're working with other researchers, not only within our organization, but also other institutions in order to bolster that security. Because if we want ZKML to last through these kind of challenges that we see coming, we really need to be ahead of that quantum curve.
Absolutely. Agreed. Obviously a lot happening at Polyhedra, and we've covered a lot today in this show, Morgan. I was stoked to get to the robotics, obviously the open source battle, talking about the events we have coming up. I do have one question that I chose out here, though I wanted to finish on because it's really it's quite a creative, fun question. So if Polyhedra were a superhero, what would its powers be and why? What do you think?
I'd say, and you might have a different opinion than me, I'd say Doctor Strange, maybe like bending reality, but through cryptographic magic instead of normal. Cool. Because, our proofs create these decentralized bridges between worlds, just like how Doctor Strange opens portals across dimensions.
That is cool. I love that. That's so cool. I would not have thought of that. My initial thought was Iron Man, like engineering, combining AI with cutting edge tech, constantly innovating, just like Tony Stark, one of my favorite characters, where we're always upgrading. So very, very cool. With that, we might leave it off for today. Thank you so much to the community, all of the questions. Huge thanks to you guys. If you want to be featured in the next one, make sure to drop your questions into our community channels. And of course, go to get your creativity hats on for the Polyhedra Proof of Love campaign. Keep them coming. We're loving it. Again, you've got till the 14th to submit
Till the
those ones.
14th.
Absolutely. And jump on and check it out. Hashtag Polyhedra Proof of Love. Some really, really creative and cool submissions. So thank you guys for that. Keep it coming. And thank you so much, Morgan, for the chat. I always love these chats. It's always so fun and a great way to start the day.
It's always great to be here. Great to be back. So definitely let's keep the conversation going and looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you, community. Have a great day, guys. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks, Polyhedrons.